Good morning. Thank you so much again for coming to Saturday school this morning. What is going to help you for today is one, we get to go over the material so you can understand what we missed, why we missed it. And another thing is you are giving your time, so just please know. Right now in your grade book, you more than likely have a 60 for the exam depending on the quality of your work for corrections that you do with Miss Adame and watching this video, I will add 5 to 10 points. So if you're writing everything down that you should, writing the justification as to why you got the question wrong, all of that will help you get closer to the 10 points, and your grade will go from the 60 to the 70. And that's how I'm here to be able to help you. But again, thank you so much for showing up. Unit 3 exam was comparing photosynthesis and cellular respiration. So looking at this first question, what does aerobic and anaerobic cellular respiration have in common, right? So in common, in case we don't know what that means, it means what do they have that is the same? And we have aerobic and anaerobic. Remember, aerobic is O2, anaerobic was no oxygen. So both of these, if you remember, are cellular respiration. And cellular respiration split into aerobic and anaerobic. Aerobic was with oxygen. It had 36 ATP. It was the one that we normally use, very efficient. Anaerobic, that AN tells you no, so it was no oxygen, and it was only 2 ATP. Not very efficient. So going through the process of elimination, right? They're both metabolic pathways which cells obtain energy. Do both give us energy? Looking here, they both give us ATP. Remember, metabolic pathways just tell us that you turn your food into energy. We know that is our answer, but let's look at why the other ones are not our answers. That's what I want us to see also on that correction page. Both require oxygen. Both occur in all living organisms. Both produce equal amounts of ATP. So knowing what we know about aerobic and anaerobic D, equal amounts of ATP, equal means the same. We know that is not true. We know that aerobic is 36 ATP and anaerobic is 2 ATP. So that's why D was not our answer, because again, in our question, they're asking what do they share in common? What do they have that is the same? Both processes occur in all living organisms. Your keyword there is all. Like all organisms do not practice the same aerobic and anaerobic. There is some bacteria that only do anaerobic, right? So that is why C would have not been our answer. And they both require oxygen. We know that one is not true because anaerobic is no oxygen. So that's the one that we mimicked in our barf bag lab. We squeezed out the air to mimic an environment without oxygen. So we know B was out. So again, just make sure that on your justification page, you have the A, B, C, D, and you're writing the little notes. This should also be included there. So then you can pause the video depending on what you need, and you'll be able to make your corrections. So again, this one was just simply comparing aerobic and anaerobic respiration. And they are both metabolic pathways, so both aerobic and anaerobic, which is cellular respiration, is a process that turns food into energy. Question 2, photosynthesis and cellular respiration both involve the use and release of gases. Which statement correctly identifies the role of gases in the two processes? So here we know that it's talking about gases. The gases that we use for photosynthesis and cellular respiration is oxygen and carbon dioxide. So if you look at photosynthesis, we know that carbon dioxide goes in. It's one of the reactants. It's what it takes from the environment, and it produces our favorite gas, oxygen, right? That is the product, because we love oxygen. Breathe it every day. Cellular respiration, remember, it is an inverse reaction. So it does the opposite. It starts off with oxygen and you produce carbon dioxide. So remember, your best example for cellular respiration is you. That's what we use. We're organisms that use cellular respiration. So we breathe in oxygen, right? And we exhale carbon dioxide. So we give that carbon dioxide to the plants. The plants take our carbon dioxide and then they give us back oxygen. That's how we're all connected. So again, we're looking for a statement that correctly identifies it. That means it is a true statement about the gases. So photosynthesis and cellular respiration both use carbon dioxide and release oxygen. So when it says use, it means they are reactants. And release means they are products. We know that these reactions are not the same. They are not the same. They are opposites of each other, so that's why that will not be the answer. So we have reactants first, and they lead to the products. So that's why A was incorrect. Photosynthesis and cellular respiration both use oxygen and release carbon dioxide. So this one is doing the same thing backwards. So right here, it was talking only about photosynthesis. And this one is talking about cellular respiration. Only. So that's why B is incorrect. Cellular respiration uses oxygen and releases carbon dioxide, so it means you have oxygen leading to CO2, while photosynthesis uses carbon dioxide and releases oxygen. We know we start off with carbon dioxide and we end up at oxygen. So that is why C is correct. It has the gases in the correct side. And cellular respiration uses carbon dioxide and releases oxygen, while photosynthesis uses oxygen and releases carbon dioxide. So here we have oxygen to carbon dioxide. This one has it switched. So this would have been like your second place in case you're confused about both processes. So again, when we're thinking about photosynthesis, remember what your frijolito needed. They needed carbon dioxide, water, and some sort of light. And cellular respiration, the process that we use, we breathe in the oxygen, that is our reactant, and we exhale carbon dioxide. Plants do the opposite. So again, your best answer for that would have been C. For this one, they like to do this type of question. So it's giving a description and you have to like tie it in and make a connection as to what it is. It's a little bit of a push with the critical thinking. So diatoms are the most common types of phytoplankton in marine habitats. Like plants, they contain chlorophyll, produce glucose from which of the following. So knowing that they are being compared to plants. Remember, whenever we think of plants, we can think of photosynthesis. And this even tells us that they produce glucose. So it means that one of the products is glucose C6H12O6. So it's asking us, how does it produce glucose? For this one, our braindom should have been photosynthesis itself. So we have light plus carbon dioxide plus water to produce glucose and oxygen. So remember, this is our glucose. Phytoplankton, in case you don't know what it is, it's like a living thing, and marine habitat just means it's like in the ocean. So again, this is a living organism and it contains chlorophyll. So in order for you to have chlorophyll, you're connecting it to the chloroplast. So again, it's asking, how do you produce glucose? From what? So we know automatically that because we're talking about plants, we're talking about chlorophyll, we're looking at the process of photosynthesis. So A and C should have been out because ATP is talking about cellular respiration. Now you should have been left between B and D, right? So B and D, carbon dioxide and oxygen, that's telling you the gases. And then carbon dioxide and water, you see it here on the reactant side, to help you produce your glucose. So just based on what your reactants are and how your reactants help you make your products, your best answer was D, because the reactants of carbon dioxide, water, and light help you produce glucose and oxygen gas. So again, for this one, it was that drag and drop question that I had warned you about. For the drag and drop, the biggest thing was understanding that you do not use all of the answers. Just trust your gut. You know these processes. You're not going to use every single thing. So again, in photosynthesis, you convert light into simple sugars. That is correct. We take light energy and we make glucose, right? So you can write your reaction here on the bottom. You have light plus carbon dioxide plus water to produce glucose and oxygen. Water is used to facilitate the process. So water is used. That means it is a reactant. And of course, we go from reactants to products. So that is correct. Carbon dioxide is used to facilitate. Again, when it says used, it's talking about being a reactant. That is correct. We have water and carbon dioxide. This is CO2. This is H2O. Simply knowing your formula would help you out a lot here. And oxygen is produced and released. Oxygen is produced. Absolutely. We see it right there. It is a product. So again, just knowing the formula for photosynthesis and that it goes from light to chemical. Our chemicals are sugar. You would have been good for here. So chlorophyll is produced. We really didn't talk about chlorophyll. That's why that statement should have been left out. It takes place in the nucleus of the cell. We know that a nucleus is where the genetic material is, but we have not talked about the nucleus in any way, shape, or form for cellular respiration or photosynthesis. It takes place in the rough endoplasmic reticulum. So if you remember, the rough ER has ribosomes. That's why it gets the name rough. And ribosomes are where proteins are made. So this has nothing to do with the process of photosynthesis or cellular respiration. And it is facilitated only by non-plant cells. So remember, plants are the special organism that actually uses both photosynthesis and cellular respiration. Plants have the chloroplast and they have a mitochondria. So they go through both of these processes. Again, not every single time you have a drag and drop are you going to use all of your answers. Now moving on to cellular respiration. You convert sugars into energy. Yes, that keyword energy is that ATP that we're talking about. Again, we can write out the process. We have glucose and oxygen. Remember, the products of cellular respiration are our reactants. And then it produces carbon dioxide, water. But this time we're creating ATP. That's the cell energy that our body needs. So that was correct. Oxygen is used. Yep, we see oxygen right here. It is definitely a reactant. Carbon dioxide is released. Yep. Remember, release means to go out. So it is definitely going out. It is a product. And water is released. We see that right here. So again, this one was just a simple check of, do you know the actual formula and can you apply it to written statements? So again, we do know that. You can pause this one, class, write down your formulas, and just make sure that you show some type of correction. So for this one, a person is asked to run on a treadmill for 2 hours so data can be gathered on how lactic acid accumulates in the human body. So accumulate just means builds up. So how does lactic acid build up in the human body? Lactic acid is a product of anaerobic respiration. The results are there below. So this little paragraph gives you a good amount of energy. We know that anaerobic means no oxygen. So when there is no oxygen, lactic acid builds up. So question A, using the information, determine how the respiration of the person has changed throughout the run. So here the person at 0 was at 4.6. At 90 minutes, that's an hour and a half, it went to the 10.4, kind of doubled. And that at an hour and a half, it doubled again. So you can tell as the person started running more, there was more lactic acid built up. You can definitely see that trend. As time increases, lactic acid increases. And just apply this to yourself. Biology is super easy to apply to our own bodies. As we run more, what is happening to our body, right? So lactic acid is a product of cellular respiration, which is no oxygen. When you run more, you have less oxygen for the most part, right? Like you're getting tired. So that's what we're trying to look at. At the beginning of the run, the cells performed aerobic respiration, but at the end of the run, anaerobic respiration when oxygen level decreased. We know that is definitely correct. You started off with anaerobic because you're pretty much okay, you're breathing correctly, but towards the end, your oxygen level does decrease, which equals to anaerobic respiration. That is no oxygen, and it increases your lactic acid. But let's see why the other ones were incorrect. At the beginning of the run, they performed anaerobic respiration and more aerobic when the oxygen levels increase. We know that you are not having more oxygen after running an hour and 30 minutes, or an hour, 2 hours, right? So B was incorrect. It had the statement backwards. At the beginning, they performed aerobic, but performed anaerobic when oxygen levels increased. That statement towards the end that your oxygen levels increase, that's a big no. So B and C would have been the first two you cross out in that process that we use for STAR, right? At the beginning of the run, cells started with anaerobic respiration and changed to aerobic. We know that did not happen. We know that we started from aerobic because we did have oxygen in our body, and then we moved over to anaerobic, which was no oxygen. So again, your best answer was A. Part B was just to claim your evidence. So as the runner as the runner ran more, oxygen depleted. And depleted just means it ended. Oxygen depleted and anaerobic respiration began. So we know that anaerobic equals no oxygen and lactic acid. Anything along those lines telling me that oxygen was reduced and lactic acid was produced would have given you the credit. So here we have a graphic. What is happening at organelle A? So your biggest clue here, class, is you have the sun pointing towards organelle A. We know that organelle B has ATP. So knowing the processes of photosynthesis and cellular respiration, we know that B has to be the mitochondria because that is where ATP is produced. And anyone looking or dealing with the sun is your chloroplast. So from here, knowing what the organelle is, we can see what process is occurring. So cellular respiration does not need light. Chemosynthesis, we don't even know what that is. We haven't gone over it. Chemosynthesis is a process with chemicals, so we know that was not it. And protein synthesis. Protein synthesis is the making of proteins, but we know we are not making proteins with the sun and ATP. So just by simple process of elimination, photosynthesis should have been your answer because that organelle A, you have the sun pointing towards it. So what are the chemicals represented by Y? So when they're telling you chemicals, we know that is your chemical buildup with your elements, and it's asking for Y specifically. So we already said this was our photosynthesis, right? And then what comes out of photosynthesis and into cellular respiration, right? So we know that we produce glucose, and oxygen. That is what is used in cellular respiration. And then what comes out of cellular respiration is ATP, carbon dioxide, and water. And that one is what goes into photosynthesis, right? So our best answer was C. For this one, class, honestly, just writing the visual, like, let me make it a little bit better. That can be your proof or your correction. So we know that here we have the chloroplast, which equals photosynthesis. And the product of photosynthesis, the arrow going out of photosynthesis, is glucose and oxygen. That is also what goes into cellular respiration in the mitochondria. We know that it's ATP, and we have carbon dioxide and water that are reactants that also go into that process. So as long as you have that written in, that can be your information. Right now, we're going to take a quick pause, make sure that you catch up with any of the questions of the first 8, and then the second video after your little restroom break, we'll give you the rest of the answers. But again, thank you so much. Make sure you're producing quality work so I can give you that credit. See you in a bit.